Do you want to learn how to trade one of the easiest markets? Or maybe you already know the secret and you're trading euro. Lower volatility of euro means lower risk. It also has a tendency to sit within trend channels. I'll be covering Elliott Wave counts for this market in depth, with support from classic technical analysis in the upcoming FX Traders Edge event on Tuesday, February 13th. If you want to make money in markets, then you do not want to miss this presentation. You have to register to view it, and if you can't be there at 11 AM, you'll get a link to view it later. If you're registered, you'll also receive a link to access special offers from each presenter, and the offer I'm going to be giving is something for free that's really valuable, so don't miss it. Hi everybody, this is Lara from Pure Elliott Wave with your Monday to Friday update for Bitcoin, Ethereum and XRP. Yesterday on Twitter I posted a chart of Bitcoin on the daily, showing you it had a couple of really strong bullish signals, and today it's making short-term higher highs. It's moving higher with a little bit of an increase in volume, which is exactly what we've been expecting, and it's really good to see. So stepping back and looking at the weekly time frame to identify next resistance, let's expect we might see resistance about 51,800. I expect we're not definitely, but very, very likely to see resistance at the prior all-time high, about 68,700. I expect we might be seeing new all-time highs from Bitcoin. It's possible it could happen in February, but I think it's a bit more likely to be March. It could even be April, but that would be my longest estimate of how long it's going to take to get up there. It depends if it's going to have another time-consuming consolidation along the way up. But when it does make new all-time highs above the highs from November 2021, I expect that's going to be when some energy is going to be released and it's going to start rocketing up higher. There will still be some consolidations and pullbacks along the way up to the eventual high of this bullish run, but I think that they're going to start to be more brief and shallow along the way up. I'm going to be very heavily relying on my Elliott Wave count to identify the end of a big third wave for Bitcoin. I'm going to be preparing that for my membership at Pure Elliott Wave this morning or later this afternoon. I do that every Monday. I can't give it to you for free. That wouldn't be fair to them. They're paying for it. If you want it, you can get it, and it's incredibly reasonably priced. It'll probably pay for itself within a week or so. I've said before, I'm still really suspicious of this crypto compare data showing this massive drop-off in volume. So zooming in, we can see that overall there's been some increase in volume as prices moving higher on the weekly. For the last 3 weeks completed here, they're all above average, but a little bit of a decline from a spike in volume week beginning 6th of January. So I'm going to conclude the volume profile overall remains bullish. ADX is very extreme. It is above 45 and it is above both DX lines on the weekly. But zooming out and looking at the full price history of Bitcoin with ADX, you can see that this very extreme reading here is not nearly as extreme as it can get during a bullish run. And then you'll also note this extreme reading from July 2011 was many months before the high of that bullish run in December 2011. The extreme reading here of April 2013 was well before the high of that bullish run in November that year. And this extreme reading here of April 2021 was prior to the all-time high. At the final high, we see some drop-off in extremity, the final end of the upward trend, kind of like divergence with RSI. ADX shows you that the end of the trend has a waning in strength of that trend. So this is not nearly as extreme as it can get, and actually this is pretty normal to see relatively just before the midway of the bullish run for Bitcoin. So we've got the early stage of the bullish run, now we're getting toward the middle. So this is exactly what I would be expecting from ADX. RSI is overbought, but again, this can get really extreme in a bullish run. Look at how extreme RSI can get, and it's relatively early to midway within a big bullish run for Bitcoin. So this does not mean that price has to turn down. This is normal to be expected at this stage in a bullish run. Money flow is not overbought, and that can get really extreme extreme, and this is one reason why I add money flow. Its volume component makes it a little bit more sensitive sometimes and gives us information that RSI doesn't always give. So I'd expect this one to get deeply overbought before this bullish run ends. There's quite a long way to go. It's not yet at the mid stage of the bullish run. We're not in the very early stage anymore. We're ramping up toward the middle of it, I expect. ATR is starting to show a nice strong increase. That is absolutely fantastic to see. I expect with volatility now returning to the market, like I said before, once it makes new all-time highs, I'm expecting an explosion in volatility and volume and interest. I expect Bitcoin will start to make headlines all around the world, and people are going to start to get interested in maybe buying some when they really should have been paying attention over the last couple of years when prices were relatively low. Real quick technicals on the daily. Price today is making highs above the previous high of 11th of January. This is reinforcing the view that the upward trend is resuming. A series of higher highs, a series of higher lows was broken for the short term. This is should now be viewed as a short-term pullback. I've taken the head and shoulders pattern off because the target's been met, and I did say last week I thought it was probably not going to be high enough. I expected we might find some resistance about 48,000. Kind of slowed things down maybe a little bit over the weekend, and now we're seeing an increase in range today for the 12th of February. The resistance now turns to support about 48,000. Along the way up, look for next resistance about 51,800, and now price is making higher highs above the 11th of January. For the short term, a little bit of energy might be released. It might get up to about 51,800 quite quickly. Price doesn't usually move in a straight line. Expect consolidations and pullbacks along the way up, but sometimes when this market has a really strong bullish run, when it's in an exponential growth phase, it can move in a straight line. We might see resistance about 51,800, but that's not guaranteed, but do look out for that number. This is the bullish signal I posted about on Twitter yesterday, a break above this resistance line. I think you could count 1, 2, 3 tests, somewhat long held for this time frame, not too steeply sloped, so not a strong bullish signal, but somewhat reasonable. This supported the view we're going to see more upward movement, and price was making highs along with on-balance volume, so on-balance volume was confirming those highs. This is the strongest bullish signal ADX can give, so really awesome to see. ADX was able to pull itself all the way down from very extreme and below 15. It's risen up from a relatively low level. Below 15 is low, and it's got a positive slope. It's now above 15. The positive DX line is above the negative. This tells us there is an upward trend at the daily time frame in a very early stage. This is extremely bullish for Bitcoin. So good to see. RSI is just now overbought at the daily time frame. I would not view this as divergence. You have to wait for a pivot to develop. That's not something I've seen in a textbook. It's a technique I've developed myself over the years to try and filter out instances where you identify between highs, between price and RSI divergence, and it just doesn't turn into anything, and then it just disappears. So if you wait for a pivot to develop between price and RSI and compare that to another pivot at a different point in time, then you identify divergence. And for a pivot, I would have to see at least 2 downward sessions or 1 really strong downward session. That's not happened yet. There's no pivot on RSI, no pivot on price. This is what I mean by a pivot. Here's a pivot, here's a pivot. You've got to see the corresponding pivot in price. There was some push from volume last week. We had Saturday, Sunday, a bit of a decline. Well, I guess that's pretty normal for a weekend. So far, Monday showing an increase beyond the weekend as buyers return to the market after a bit of a sleepy weekend. And we're seeing a bit of an increase in range too today. So that's good to see for Bitcoin. Money flow still neutral, not overbought. ATR finally starting to show a bit of an increase. Finally, volatility is returning to the market along with a bit of volume. I'll expect this to show a further increase. Overall, in this chart, there's a lot of bullishness, and it's a really early stage relatively in this bullish run for Bitcoin. Again, I think we might be seeing new all-time highs from Bitcoin. The earliest, the end of February, but I think that's too early. I think sometime in March is quite likely, maybe toward the middle or end of March, possibly even into April if it just has another consolidation along the way up. This is my Elliott Wave count for Ethereum. It expects there's a third wave at minute, minor, which is within intermediate, primary and cycle. So a third wave at 6 degrees. This is an extremely bullish wave count for Ethereum. This channel's been working really well for us for the last few weeks. Draw it from the low of 12th of October to the low here of 23rd of January, place a parallel copy on the high of 9th of December. Any deeper pullbacks along the way may find support at the lower edge of the channel, although I think we've probably had the last pullbacks back here. I think it's on its way up now to test resistance at the upper end. The last time it found resistance there, that initiated a pullback. I think the next time, if the Elliott Wave count is correct with multiple third waves, the next time it touches resistance here, it may initiate only a short, small, shallow pullback and then a breakthrough of resistance. We might see a back test of support and then moving up and away. This is close to a base channel. It's a slightly adjusted base channel around minute 1 and 2, and the base channel for a bull market, the lower edge should provide support and the upper edge should see the power of the third wave able to break through resistance. And when that happens, you can have further confidence in your Elliott Wave count because price is behaving as expected for a third wave. So I'll look for a break above resistance at this trend line. When we get a new high above the high of the 12th of January at 2717.2, I'll pull the invalidation point up to here. But for now, I have to acknowledge the possibility minute wave 2 could be continuing sideways as some kind of combination, expanded flat, some kind of corrective structure. Once minuet 3 has moved beyond the end of minuet 1, it's met that core Elliott Wave rule, and then I'll pull the invalidation point up. Bit premature to do that today. Technicals on the daily, Ethereum isn't making new short-term highs, but I expect it's pretty likely to follow Bitcoin pretty quickly, so I'll expect new highs this week or next week above 2717.2. We might see some resistance along the way. We might see a pullback or a consolidation develop around 2,700. It might not happen though. We might have some power to just break through this resistance at the next test. If that happens, next resistance 3,580. The 8th of February saw a nice increase in volume, but over the weekend volumes dropped off as it's been a rather quiet weekend, and so far for Monday it's not returned too much, but we're still only halfway through the day, so there's still a few hours for it to redeem itself. I'll be looking to see if we're going to see an increase in volume. I'll be expecting it. If we see it, I'll have a bit more confidence in a bullish outlook for the short term for Ethereum, but if we don't see it, that's not a deal breaker. It doesn't have to increase day on day. Sometimes you do see a decline and then it still increases overall. We might be seeing a weak bullish signal if this current session closes green, if it's strong enough to push on balance volume above the resistance line, but that'll be a weak signal because this resistance line has quite a strong slope. ADX still is giving the strongest bullish signal it can give for Ethereum. It's still telling us Ethereum is in an early stage of a new bullish run. RSI is not overbought. There's a long way to go before this bullish run gets extreme, and money flow is still neutral. Neither of them overbought. A very, very long way to go before this gets as extreme as it can get. ATR, a little bit slight, tiny little bit of an increase. I'll expect this one to also show an increase, and if it does, I'll have more confidence in this bullish outlook for Ethereum, but I do have reasonable confidence at this stage. Let's go backward on the XRP wave counts today. This is the preferred Elliott Wave count. It expects that XRP is in the early stage of a third wave at minor degree with an intermediate, which is also within primary and cycle. A third wave at 4 big degrees is in the earliest stage. I'll be expecting new all-time highs for XRP. Definitely this year. It might be May, June for this one. It's lagging behind the other two. This is my preferred Elliott Wave count. It sees intermediate 2, a relatively brief zigzag here with minor 1 and 2 complete with an intermediate 3. So minor 3 has to move beyond the end of minor 1. Intermediate 3 has to move beyond the end of intermediate wave 1. Primary 3 has to move beyond the end of primary 1. And cycle 3 has to move beyond the end of cycle 1. This has a pretty low probability for the ending contracting diagonal for minus C if intermediate 2 is continuing as a zigzag. A, B, C. The contracting diagonal may be now nearing completion. Minute wave 5 may not be longer than minute wave 3. Equality would take it down to 0.4007, so it is able to make a new low below the end of minor A at 0.4456 to avoid a truncation, and the diagonal could be complete. But in order for C to move below the end of A, the fifth wave of this ending contracting diagonal would have to have a really big overshoot of the 1-3 trend line. That looks really unlikely. It would look really weird. They do tend to end with an overshoot of the 1-3 trend line, those fifth waves of contracting diagonals, but not that big. That just looks weird. That's technical too. Looks weird. Okay, it's not, but anyway, you know what I mean. My preferred Elliott Wave count, the first one I showed you, sees Intermediate Wave 2 complete back here, and it's a bit more shallow than big second wave corrections commonly are. I think it's about 75%, so that's actually somewhat acceptable. It's just not as deep as they usually are. They're usually 80 to 90%, the first wave. So this first wave count, which has the lowest probability, would expect a continuation of this pullback down to this range. XRP really is lagging behind the others, but I do expect support about 0.4875 now is most likely to hold. There's a cluster of 6 hammer bullish candlestick reversal patterns around these lows, so I expect we're probably on the way up to find new highs, testing resistance along the way up. The last signal given by the moving averages was a death cross. This chart is looking more bearish than the other two. Today, so far, we're getting a very bullish long lower wick. Let's see how the 12th of February closes. If we see another bullish long lower wick, I'd expect overall upward movement this week from XRP. Volume is overall declining. It's still basically in a big consolidation, really, and it's normal to see volume decline as price moves sideways. It needs to break out of this consolidation for us to have confidence in the direction of the next trend for XRP. The last signal given by on-balance volume, though, was bullish, and this is a reasonable signal. This trend line that's been broken has 5 tests, a bit of a slope, but it's not too steep, and it's somewhat long held for this time frame. So that's a bullish signal suggesting we are going to get upward movement for the short term. ADX reached very extreme for the downward trend. It's now declining. It's quite a ways to go before it indicates a trend change if there has been one. It's a lagging indicator based on a 14-day average, so it may take about a couple of weeks to turn around, like a bit of a large ship having to turn around in the ocean. It's just going to take a while. RSI got really close to oversold. Doesn't tend to do that in bearish movements for XRP, so it was rather extreme, the end of that pullback. Money flow got somewhat close to oversold as well. Volatility and volume are declining as prices moving lower to those last lows and basically moving sideways within a big consolidation. I'll expect volatility to return to the market, but maybe not yet. XRP is lagging behind the other two. And that's it from me today with your quick update. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. I'm preparing to go from the United States to the UK next weekend, and so with the work that preparation requires, I'm not going to be able to do any extra free analysis for you guys. Once I'm settled in London, then I hope to be able to run a new vote and give you some extra free analysis. People keep asking, but my answer's always going to be the same. I'll have another vote when I'm able. So thanks for your patience.